A decent number of fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender really didn't like its sequel series, Avatar: The Legend of Korra, with some even refusing to finish it or watch it at all. I had always liked both series pretty equally and couldn't easily imagine how someone could like one and not the other. I felt prompted to create my own video essay where I take some of the most common criticisms of The Legend of Korra and break down and analyze them. I'll start with a pretty common one, people not liking Korra herself as a character. To me, it seemed like she had a lot in common with Katara in The Last Airbender, who was always a well-loved character by the fanbase, so I wondered why people didn't like Korra in the same way. Could it be that she was simply different from her predecessor Aang? Were people more critical of her than they were of Katara just because she's now the protagonist and she's in the spotlight? Could internalized misogyny even be to blame? Whatever the reason for any particular viewer, it's worth thinking critically about. Like any character, there are things to like and dislike about her, as there should be. An episode of Book 4 that I'll be referencing a few times in this video is Remembrances, in which several of the main characters of The Legend of Korra reflect on the past and their personal growth. In this episode, Tenzin tells Korra that when he first met her at the beginning of Book 1, she was sometimes brash, selfish, and rude, but that over time she had grown to be very wise, patient, considerate, and understanding. A character like Korra is one that audiences are encouraged to see grow and follow along with their story to see that growth. Even at the start, Korra wants to help people, not only because she sees it as her duty, but because she genuinely wants to, Avatar or not. I think anyone who doesn't like Korra at first just needs to give her a chance to grow into the best version of herself. I'm willing to bet they did the same for Zuko when watching the first series, after all. Aside from her personality, a few fans seem to think that Korra is either too good or too incompetent, sometimes a cognitive dissonance of both at once. Either way, you have to remember that although Korra is the Avatar, she is also human. Every human being will do some things right and some wrong, and you have to remember all that she goes through, all that she's up against. At one point, she faces the literal embodiment of evil itself. Another time, she's lethally poisoned and barely survives. She always fights for what she knows is right, though, to the best of her ability. She damn well deserves some credit for that. Some fans didn't think that the first series needed a sequel to begin with, and so they may be more inclined to dislike or be overly critical of The Legend of Korra just because they see it as something that shouldn't have existed. It's true that sequels often aren't needed, but they're not always bad either. Avatar: The Last Airbender was its own self-contained story, and so is this series. The Legend of Korra doesn't refute or ruin the legacy of the original, it honors it. We all love the world of Avatar, and so do Bright, so of course they took this opportunity to expand it and address some questions that the first series left open or unanswered. There are those who didn't like the fact that Toph became a police officer. This one I can kind of agree with. It didn't seem to fit her personality as well as some other occupations might have. Personally, I think she was mostly in it for the opportunity to work with gadgets and beat up bad guys. And this show is anything but propaganda or whatever you want to call it. There's an entire episode in Book 1 about what can happen when the police abuse their power. The most we see of Toph in this series is her as an old lady, and she definitely seems a lot like her younger self at that point in time. Speaking of Toph, some fans complained about not seeing more of the original gang in this series. Well, first of all, this isn't their show, and it's 70 years later. Not everyone lived that long. Katara basically tells Korra this word for word at the very beginning of the series. It seemed to me like her dialogue wasn't just speaking to Korra, but to fans as well. If you think that Aang in particular didn't get to live long enough, remember that he was technically over 100 years old and had been frozen in an iceberg for a century. Some fans also didn't like that the original gang weren't always the best parents, such as Toph not offering guidance for her daughter's growth or Aang seemingly giving more attention to Tenzin than to his other kids on account of Tenzin being the only airbender of the three. This goes back to the idea of letting characters be the humans that they are by accepting that they won't do everything right all the time. Imperfect doesn't mean bad. Besides, both of the issues in that example are resolved. Toph admits that she wasn't a great mother and makes an effort to reconnect with her daughters. After Aang has passed, his kids accept that he wasn't perfect and make up with one another. I'm sure they'll talk about it with their mom too. Each of Aang's kids also inherited some good qualities from him. Bumi is adventurous, fun-loving, and fearless. Kaya is caring and compassionate while also assertive. And Tenzin is patient, spiritual, and hardworking. A notable difference between The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra is that the former covered one arc over all 3 of its books with the same major villain, while Korra had each book as its own story. With this, you have to remember that each season of The Legend of Korra was ordered individually rather than all together. That didn't really even end up being too much of a problem in terms of storytelling. When the first series took place, the world had remained largely the same for a century as it was at war with the Fire Nation. The Legend of Korra takes place at a time when technology and society were rapidly progressing and changing, and there was just more going on in the world in general. So it's perfectly reasonable that this world's Avatar would be dealing with multiple issues in a relatively short span of time. A sizable crowd were annoyed with the beginnings episodes because they were supposedly a retcon of some lore established in the first series. I don't believe that it was, though, nor that the creators would do something like that at this point. In the first series, it was established that the first benders of each element were the moon, dragons, sky bison, and badger moles. In Beginnings, we see lion turtles bestow the abilities of bending onto humans. There is a way that both of these things can be congruent with one another, and I think the show intended it that way all along. Humans got the ability to bend in the first place from the lion turtles, but they learned the actual methods and techniques from those other entities. The Sky Bison as the first airbenders was directly mentioned in The Legend of Korra, so that aspect wasn't just tossed out the window. Toph's backstory in the first series even goes along with this. She was born with the ability of earthbending, but she learned how to use that skill for things such as her earth sense from the badger moles, who like her were both earthbenders and blind. For similar reasons, some fans didn't like the arc of Book 3 in which people suddenly gain the ability of airbending, saying it wasn't properly explained. Except, it was. It's directly stated to have been the energy shift that occurred during harmonic convergence and was about restoring balance. For so long, there had only been enough airbenders in the world to count on one hand while there were potentially hundreds or thousands of the other types of benders. More people were given airbending so that the numbers could be more balanced, as they were always meant to be. Some fans were not too keen on the romance tangle, as my friend called it, specifically that of Asami, Mako, and Korra. This is something else that's sorted out in the Remembrances episode. Mako explains that he had some feelings for both Asami and Korra, and he was just confused about it all. Remember that these characters are teenagers. They're bound to have some confusing feelings here and there. I think Korra and Asami getting together in the end was the natural progression of things, especially because it didn't happen out of nowhere. The two grew closer together more and more as the series went on. The whole love triangle thing may have just been there to add some drama, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nickelodeon wanted it more than anyone else did. But again, the show itself later admits that it was unnecessarily complicated, and after Book 2, it's not a problem anymore. Now that we've gone over the issues that people have with the show, let's discuss the things that I think most, if not all of us, can agree it did right. First and foremost is the fact that the showrunners named a central character after Mako Iwamatsu, the late original voice actor for Uncle Iroh. It had a female protagonist and LGBTQ+ representation. The show expanded expanded the lore of aspects such as bending and the spirit world, and explores the role that bending would play in a more modernized setting, as well as the place of non-benders in such a society. We also get to learn how the Avatar cycle began with the very first Avatar, Wan, and the identity of the Avatar spirit herself, Rava. To conclude, I'm not trying to say that The Legend of Korra is better than The Last Airbender, or worse for that matter. It never tried to be better than or a replacement for the original, just a continuation and expansion. I'm also not saying you have to like it, just that you should give it a chance and not just refuse to watch it because of what you've seen or heard about it. If you have any particular reasons not to like it, give some thought to them and assess whether they're really fair or not. It really just seems to me like some people are being overly critical of the show. We've definitely seen worse content in the name of Avatar, most notably the live-action movie, and at least we had Bryke on board for this series, unlike the new Netflix adaptation. There were worse things that could have happened instead of what we actually got in The Legend of Korra, too. For example, The Last Airbender could have had something like a Teen Titans Go-esque reboot that took away all the seriousness and drama that made the original series so compelling and tried a little too hard to be silly and funny all the time. Anyway, I think the best thing to do is just let The Legend of Korra be what it is, its own thing, and that we all agree to disagree on what we like and dislike about it. Thank you for watching this video. I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments. Just be respectful about it towards me and each other. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.